Hi, this is Chris Dyer, and I'm the CEO and consultant and best-selling author of the book, The Power of Company Culture. And on today's show, we're going to talk about how you can have a culture that not only performs well, has high profits, but incredible productivity, all through following some of the best things that I've learned in my organization and from the best people in the whole entire country that I've been able to talk to. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, do you need to up-level your leadership? Well, on this episode, we dive into how any company can build a culture that improves productivity, performance, and profit, even if everyone's remote. How? Well, you'll find out on this episode. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook page. Just go to Dov Baron, just look for Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Podcast on Facebook and you'll find it right there. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please go over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. When you do, let us know. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Lancaster, Philadelphia to Tampa, Florida. You can also find us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, a regular viewer, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show. We are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, you can also find us on Google Home and Alexa. Just say, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, a leader in any capacity, you know that corporate culture is where the rubber meets the road between leadership and those we lead. As much as we might intellectually know that, oftentimes leaders don't know specifically what to do to create the kind of culture that they want. Furthermore, in an age where more and more of us are working with and leading virtual teams, how does culture work in that context? Well, stay tuned because I got a great guest for you today. Chris Dyer. Now, he is a recognized performance expert, entrepreneur, consultant, and best-selling author. He works with leading organizations to help them transform their cultures to boost performance and gain an even greater edge in the marketplace. He's the author of the best-selling book, The Power of Company Culture, and he's the founder and CEO of People G2, a background check company that has appeared on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies, I think more than once. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome Chris Dyer!
I love it.
Good to have you on, my man. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Took us a few months to get here, but I'm happy to be here.
It always takes a while. I do apologize for that. That's what happens. I'm afraid. So let's jump in. Let's get right under the covers right away. Who is Chris Dyer? What makes you tick? What is it about you that most people wouldn't know or wouldn't actually realize rather?
Yeah. So I think maybe I was just talking about this with somebody else this weekend with another entrepreneur, and I think what's really important for entrepreneurs, for leaders, is to know what are they good at, right? Mm-hmm. And to make sure people know what it is you're good at. And then, of course, then you can recognize what you're bad at and make sure you don't do that stuff, or you hire other really great people to help you with that, right?
Exactly.
But being very clear about what you're good at. And so here's one of the things I'm good at. I can look at 1,000 ideas. This is called ideation. If you've ever done the Strengths Finders Gallup test, I'm really good. That's my number one strength, is to say, here, put 1,000 ideas on the whiteboard, and I go, hey, that one right there and that one over there, those two are what we need to focus on. That's what's important right now, and the rest of it can go away, and we'll talk about it later. And so I'm able to help with clarity, with what's actually important. And that really translates into my work, what I've done with companies and what I've done with them inside the book, is through all of my interviews with top leaders, all of the books that I've read, all the experiences I've had. There are some very clear and concrete things that we see inside of the best organizations over and over and over again. They call it something different. They have their own way of doing it, but there's these same overarching things that they do over and over again, that when you know it, right? When you know the secret, it's like, how do you make a pie? Well, if you've never made a pie, it might seem really hard to do. Someone hands you a recipe and you're like, oh, I can make a pie, right? Here, I can follow the directions. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Yes. So it's the same thing, I think, with culture, that if you have the recipe, if you know what you're supposed to do, then you can go back and practice and get better and better and better at it.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that, you did a lot of, research for your book, and one of the things you and I talked about in our previous chat was that a lot of that came out of not really actually focusing on something, but it just came up again and again and again. As you said, it was said in many different forms. In the book, The Power of Company Culture, you talk about 7 pillars of corporate culture that, that we might say them differently, but I really would like to sort of touch on those and see if we can pull out a couple of them and help our viewers, our listeners, to really dig in a bit.
Sure.
Is that okay with you?
Sure. Yeah. So, the first one, and I find this is the one that's the most impactful for companies. And it's also kind of the most misunderstood, and one that people think they're doing, but they're really not. And so it's transparency. Mm-hmm. So you want to call it clarity, you want to call it transparency, but it's how much information can you get out to your employees? The more information they have about how the organization works, how things are done, what the goals are, what everyone else is doing, the more information you can get to everyone, and that they understand, that they can digest, and that they can use, the better your company will be. So we used to have this issue. I used to hire someone, and you could watch them go down this progression. They would come in my office a week in, a month in, 3 months in, a year in, with the same idea, right? The same, we should do this, right? And we've had this discussion 100 times. They're just now finally getting the information and just now finally catching up to where everyone else is. But if we would provide them this information preemptively, right, then they could come to me with better ideas, innovative ideas, instead of just like you could see them coming. They come with this idea that everyone else has already had, right?
Right.
We didn't share that information with them. Now, there are companies that take this to an extreme, that share their employee salary data, right? That take this to an absolute 100% transparency.
Yes.
And not every organization feels comfortable with that. Everyone has got their different level of how, and maybe you're building missiles, right? Your secrets can't be out there. So there's a difference on how transparent you can be based on your industry, your company type, what you're doing. But the more you can be, as far as you can push it inside of your own bubble, the better off it is. And that is where
that right there is an interesting piece, isn't it? Because as you said, there is obvious corporate espionage and secrecy things to be considered, of course. Mm-hmm. But even when there isn't that, very often a company is like, well, I'm just not comfortable with that. And one of the things that I would say to that, and I really want to know what your thoughts are, is get over it. I mean, you really have to get over it, because we don't live even as little as 15 years ago. It's not 2000, the year 2000. It's, as we record this, it's 2019, and it's changed dramatically. And if we don't reveal, people will just don't trust you.
Right. They don't. And so what you're missing out on, though, is innovation. You're missing out on, actually, if you look at a lot of organizations, they struggle with maybe different departments and different teams actually fighting with each other. Yeah. And there being that, if you worry about politics and you're dealing with like really strong different managers and groups, that you're putting out fires and you're babysitting personalities all day, it's actually a transparency problem. Because I will bet you that if you look at their comp plans, you look at those top leaders, that their goals and what they're being asked to do are contrary to other departments. So the sales team is being asked to go do one thing, the marketing team is being asked to do another thing, the customer service team is being asked to do another. And if you look, there is no way for all three groups to actually meet their goals. One will lose or two will lose because of the way they've been caught, because no one ever looked at it holistically. But when you have transparency, if everyone is allowed to know what everyone else's goals are, then you can go, wait a minute, you're asking us to go and be number one in this market, but yet you put the marketing team's goals to go be number one in this other market. Those things don't work together, right? These are organizations that there's not gonna be a problem when you have 5 employees, but when you have 500 or 5,000 employees, we see this all the time. And so they are already set up to fail. So transparency helps eliminate those kind of problems.
But it also stops, what I love about what you're saying here, Chris, is what it also stops is it stops companies bullshitting themselves. Yes. Because, it's easy to go, well, it's our sales department or it's the marketing this problem. No, you're setting 2 separate goals that actually conflict each other. And then we're brought in, you and I are brought into companies and we go, well, we've got a siloing issue. And I go, no, you got a leadership issue. And they go, no, it's very sad. No, you got a leadership issue. I promise you, it's a leadership transformed into culture. Because here's my thing around culture, and I want to hear your opinion on it. There's a lot of talk about what culture is, and we can go into that in all kinds of ways, and we will. But one of the things that in a boiled down situation, as I always say, is you've got there's the culture you think you have, and there's the culture you have. And those two things are often very different. And without a real open communication, you will never know. But ultimately, culture for me is permission. It's how the leaders set up permission. So if we say, well, our culture is we all start at 8, but I start in that job, in that company, and I come in at 5 after and I go, oh, I'm really sorry to be late. And somebody goes, oh, it's no problem. It's okay. We're all right with that. That's the culture. 5 after 8 is the culture, not 8.
Right.
And so it's about permission, about how we get to be, not just around the rules, but just in our ways. Do you see it differently, or is that it, or am I missing a piece there?
Yeah, I mean, roughly. So I think culture is how you get things done. It's that roadmap of what's acceptable, what's not, what are you supposed to do, what are you not supposed to do. It's sort of that the rules and the norms and the guidelines that happen. So you could look at the differences in culture from society standpoint, right?
Sure.
Is asking for a second glass of tea in one country an insult, and it's completely acceptable in another, right? There are these norms, right,
exactly.
that happen. And then inside of a business context, there are norms that happen as well. And the
Absolutely.
problem is that norms get created based on the whims, or just because one manager was there and it became institutionalized, and that could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. But we want culture to be intentional. And so we want to design it and create it so those norms and everything are how we want them to be and how we have chosen them to be, right? It's almost if we take it back to the society example, if we created a utopia, right? If we created this society of people that could all come together and be perfectly harmonious, what does that look like? Well, that's what we should be trying to do inside of our organizations, because we need to set that up so that they can work and know how to work, right? And culture for me is also that I see the stronger the culture, actually the less management has to go on. Now, leadership has to go there, but the less management actually occurs. What I mean by that, when people know what the answer is because they understand what the culture is, understand I'm being given 2 ways I can go, and the culture's clear, the decision is clear. And they don't usually have to call in their manager all the time to help them make a decision because they already know where to go, right? Yeah. So leadership gets more intense, and management actually becomes less, and people become more empowered to make more good decisions on their own every day. And then organizations start seeing that snowball effect. They get faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what's another one of these pillars? Let's go a bit further.
Yeah, another one is positivity. So it's the way in which organizations look at their challenges. So appreciative inquiry is the filter that I talk about in the book. It's a fantastic methodology. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, basically like the neuroscientists over here have been studying the brain, and the psychologists, I call them the hippies, are over here talking about how the brain works in real life. And they have finally come together, all of their research, everything. They're actually now at the same conferences talking about appreciative inquiry, because they have proven the same thing, both through neuroscience and through psychology, that the way we look at problems, or the way we look to solve things is so much better and so much more effective if we are looking at things positively. Mm-hmm. So a good example of that is a client calls you up and says, "Hi, I'm your client and I'm mad." Okay. Mm-hmm. Something didn't happen right. We typically think about, how do I get that client back to the status quo? How do I get them back to where they were before they were mad at me? Right. That's problem solving.
Yes.
And appreciate the way the best organizations work. And so Zappos would be a perfect example of this, right? Customer calls in and they say, "This is an opportunity for me to not only deal with your issue, but how do I make you even happier? How do we go beyond where you were the moment before you got mad at me?" Right? And how do I have this interaction with you that you are so happy that you're thanking me at the end of the call, and you're now a more committed client than you were before I pissed you off because I didn't deliver something on time or didn't do something I was supposed to do. And so it's that approach about how do we have conversations to think about every interaction with every client, every vendor, everyone in that value chain, to dream about how can things be bigger and better in that interaction every time, instead of how do we just keep repeating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's profoundly important. But I think that for oftentimes leaders just think that that's beyond them. Do you mind giving us an example of what appreciative inquiry would look like, so that our listeners, our viewers go, "Oh, sure, I get it"? Because, like you said, I think that people listening to it might assume it's a problem-solving situation, rather than how, before they were pissed off, they were a score of 20 out of 100. I've solved the problem. I've got them back to a 20, but actually with positive inquiry, I want them to go out at a 30 or a 40.
Right. Yeah, so you have those types of interactions where you're trying to help build the next thing with those clients. But another way to look at this is, how do you deal with internally? So let's say your sales team maybe your pipeline isn't what it's supposed to be, and so therefore you're not closing enough deals, right? Mm-hmm. In a traditional thought process, we have a problem here. Our sales team isn't meeting their goals. What do we do? Let's get them all in a room. Let's get them a new consultant. Let's bring in a new strategy. Let's throw more marketing dollars, right? You're trying to solve the problem. Right. Appreciative inquiry says, let's go in and study our sales team and figure out what's working. Which of our salespeople are doing a good job? Where are they doing a good job? Are there particular markets? Are there verticals? Is there a certain area where we're doing well? Okay. And so if we're doing well in an area, let's go do a lot more of that to start, right? Ooh. As a starting point. Because you may have half of your sales team might be selling into company Y, and your other half is selling into company X from a vertical standpoint, and one is working really well and the other one isn't. Stop selling over there for a while, go sell more in where it's working, and then go back and take your process and say, now, how could we do better in this other area, right? Mm-hmm. What do we need to change? We've got to iterate to get better over there. But I often see that we try to focus in on, why are these 3 salespeople doing bad? What can we do to help these 3 salespeople do? No. Look at your top 3. What are they doing to be successful? Repeat that. And if you have to get rid of those other 3 that aren't doing a good job, that might be the answer. The answer might be, you need to help teach them what the top 3 are doing, right? So what are we doing well? How do we repeat that? How do we do more of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So we've got transparency, we've got positivity, but not as in, and I'm really glad that we got into that a little bit, because I want people to grasp that this is not about rah, let's have a positive attitude. No. Right? Because it's that, for me, that's a complete waste of time. But this is actually actively so, in that it's this it's this appreciative inquiry at an active level. Let's really look at instead of looking at what's going wrong, let's look at what's going right. How do we grow that? How do we develop that? How do we multiply what's going right? We can still problem solve with what's not going wrong, but we want to focus in on what's going right first.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's awesome.
So we have this conversation with our clients all the time. They'll call up and so we have turnaround times, right? So sometimes it takes us longer to get a background check done than it does other times. Mm-hmm. We'll have someone call us and say, oh, this one took 2 days. Oh, they're really angry. And we go and we slow down and we go, okay, so let's talk about what went right here. Right. And then they go, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, it took 2 days, but look, we found that this person was like, had all these problems. Well, yeah. Okay. So was it good that we took the time to find all the information when you were able? Well, yeah, that was good. Okay, great. Now let me pull up all of your turnaround times for the last 2 months. Now look, your average time was under a day. It took us less than a day to get this back to you on average. How is that okay? Does that work? Well, yeah, that works. So we start with all the positives, right? And explain to that instead of saying, whoa, you're wrong. You're not valid for thinking that. You need to understand. Well, I mean, I'm going to tell you how I'm the smartest person in the room and you're dumb, Mr. Client, and you don't understand. We backed up and started about what the positives were. So it really gives us and gives all my people in my organization a framework to have a conversation too, which is super important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had this conversation with a very good friend of mine who's an entrepreneur. I was actually helping on yesterday morning, on Sunday morning, and we were sitting, we were chatting about, how he's actually a genius with the body. Like he understands the body, right? And he's a somatic mechanic. That's what I gave him as a brand.
All right.
Superb. He understands the mechanisms of the body the way nobody else does. And I said, what pisses you off when somebody talks to you? And he goes, if they ask me if I'm a personal trainer, he goes, it infuriates me. And I go, why? And he said, because I'm not a personal trainer. I said, well, do you train people personally? He goes, yeah, but that's not what I am. And much more than that. And I said, okay, so I get it because I've had the same thing. I said, people used to say to me for years, are you a motivational speaker? And I would just be furious. But okay. I said, one of the things I learned from a very good friend of mine is people will use the reference point they understand.
Yes.
And we, in our egoic way, want to make them wrong. And that doesn't endear them to us. And right. So what you're saying about what I love about this context of communication is that you're not making the person wrong first. You're making them right and saying, okay, but let's look at what's positive here. So, right. Oh, okay, so you're not happy with that? I understand that. Let's look at what went right. It's like, okay. And I love that because yeah. it doesn't shame them. And I think so much of what, I've been writing a lot about this and speaking a lot about this, that leadership has been about, in the form that we knew it, has been about shaming. I'm going to shame you for not hitting the numbers. I'm going to shame you for not having your people engaged in the level that they need to be engaged. I'm going to shame you as opposed to, let's look at what you're really great at.
Yeah.
Right. So I love this in the context of actually dealing with a challenge rather than getting defensive, which is natural. I want everybody to understand that as you listen. It's natural for you to go and get a bit freaked out when somebody comes at you. But yeah. This is a way for you to pull down that stress for yourself and for the other person. Love that. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you mentioned that reference point. That's actually a really common cognitive bias. And this might be really interesting for your listeners to understand. So people don't know what they don't know. And they are unable to make a conclusion. Well, not that they're typically, unless they're actively aware of this and they're thinking about it, which most people aren't.
Right.
If you are given something to think about, you can only take the information in your brain initially to make a conclusion. And I had this happen to me. It was like an eye awakening thing when I was at this safari park in San Diego with my kids. They brought out this animal and it had these long rabbit ears and it had big kangaroo looking legs. And they said, what is it? Some of the kids said it was a rabbit. Some of the kids said it was a kangaroo. Some parents thought they're really smart and said it must be a marsupial, right? And the scientists said, no, it's none of this. It's a rat, right? It's just a rat. It's called a jerboa. But she explained, because you're trying right away, your brain is trying to shortcut everything. It immediately said rabbit ears, kangaroo legs. It must somehow be a rabbit, kangaroo-y, marsupial thing. And you didn't even bother. Your brain didn't even stop to think, maybe I don't have enough information. Maybe it's something else. I'm just taking whatever reference points I already have in my brain to try to explain what I'm seeing in this moment. And that happens at work all day long. And that's, again, why transparency is so important when we started out with that pillar. Because if people don't have information, if they don't have the reference points, they make bad conclusions, bad assumptions, and they leave your organizations, or they're passive aggressive, or they give bad information to the next person down the road. So we have to remember that people aren't intentionally trying to make bad conclusions. Just don't have the information or the reference points.
Right. And that's why that transparency piece is so vital. I love that. Yeah, I can't agree with you more on that. You know, let's just jump over for a minute to something a little bit more personal. The recession obviously destroyed many very well-established companies. Others were transformed in the process. Your company, like almost everyone else, was hit hard, but you guys transformed. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so when the recession hit and clients weren't ordering anymore and not paying their bills, I had a lot of extra time to sit and think about what we were going to do next, you know? When we first started the company, we used to wait for the fax machine to go off and an order to come in. And in between orders, we used to like putt golf, you know, around the office because we were waiting for orders. And when the recession hit, it felt a little bit like that. You know, all of a sudden things slowed down. And so I had this time to reflect. And that was when I decided I was going to redo my culture. I was going to reinvent the company as if we were starting over from day one and figure out what was working and what do we want to change? What do we want to make better? And most importantly, how are we going to survive this? And if we
So how many people did you have at that time? Like, so lead up to the recession.
Yeah. So at that point we are, 18 full-timers and 2,000 independent contractors.
But you had a bricks and mortar business.
Right.
So
Bricks
there's
and
an
mortar.
office to go to and everybody's going to that with the set of hours, etc.
Right.
And then you decide, okay, the recession's here. We've been slapped like everybody else. We need to re-examine. We need to refocus and see what's next. What happened?
So we changed the culture. We realized the culture was about me because I was the entrepreneur. And early on when I started the business, everyone had to come to me for things. And that was a part of how we did it. But we had to undo that. We had to make it so that they could make decisions on their own, come up with things on their own. And I could be a part of their teams and I could be a part of the energy. But I was no longer the man, Oz, behind the curtain, twisting the dials and pushing the buttons. That couldn't be it anymore. It had to evolve out of that. And every entrepreneurial type business starts off that way at some level because it's you and one or two other people wearing 9 hats and you're all, everything can flow through your head, but you couldn't do that.
And it's the thing that probably grew the company initially because there's your fire as an entrepreneur and your desire and your willingness to work and your willingness to wear all those hats. But it's the very same thing that grows the business. It will actually sink the business because it's single man or single woman or single individual focused.
Right. And then the second part is we had to realize that some of the people that were a perfect fit for us as a small company we had outgrown them. Right. And they were not the right people for us to come out of this stronger. So we worked really, really hard to figure out who that was, who was going to be with us and who couldn't. We did some very intentional things to make sure that we helped them find their next job. We did not fire anybody. We didn't lay anybody off. But if we identified that we didn't think that they were a long-term fit for us, we kept them on until we could find them a new and probably better job for them.
Wow.
And that was an important factor for us. And then the next thing we did is to survive from a financial standpoint. And this turned out to be, for us, the most important cultural choice we made. But originally, it was purely a fiscal decision. Right. We went remote. We got rid of our office. We got rid of the electricity bill and the telephone bill and all that stuff. And we went all 100% remote. And I had some people that were really excited about doing this. I had a lot of people that said, I'll do it because you signed my paycheck. And I had a few people that said, you're crazy. This is the stupidest thing you've ever done. And I thanked them for their candor, but I said, we're doing it anyways, right?
Right.
And
thank you, but no thank you.
and 2 weeks in of doing this, every single person had called me on their own to thank me and said it was the best thing we'd ever did. They were getting so much more work done. They loved working from home. They eliminated their commute, all these wonderful things. And then out of that, we have grown into this really unique and special culture because we had to develop some really fun and cool and intentional ways to work, because working remote is different than working. You can't just walk down 3 cubicles down and ask someone a question. You have to have a different process to make that work.
So let's go into this for a minute, because I think this is a vital piece. More and more of us are working with and leading remote virtual teams. How does culture work in that context? Because I think a lot of the framework that we have as culture is what happens when we walk through the door.
Right.
And there's no door to walk through. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff around. I mean, we do some of the work with it, but a lot of companies deal with, they're fearful about accountability. They're fearful about, you know, you say you're working, but maybe you're sitting at home playing around on Instagram,
right,
rather than actually being working. Talk to us about this, what seems, for many, I'm sure, quite unbelievable, this idea of a corporate culture that is virtual, because now we're global. You know, you could have workers in different countries. So you're dealing with different cultures as well as different locales.
So let's break this down in a couple areas. So coincidentally, one of the other pillars in the book is measurement. And so we had to figure out how to measure people's productivity in a much better way. We were being lazy before, honestly. We assumed that you saw papers moving and staplers clicking, and people showed up on time and left, 5 minutes later than they were, that they stayed late. They must be working hard. And that was a bunch of crap. That was not it at all. People could trick you. If people don't want to work, it doesn't matter if they're sitting in their cubicle or sitting at home, right? If you don't have a good way to measure their output and their productivity, it doesn't matter what the format is. I just think that traditional brick and mortar work allows for people to trick you a lot easier. It's actually harder to trick me in a remote setting because we have very much clearer lines to what you're supposed to do, what your output or your accomplishments or whatever it is are supposed to be. So, is your team performing? Are you making your sales goals? How are being rated on a customer service standpoint? All these different, it's so much clearer now than it ever used to be. So if anyone has that fear about that, it's actually, you probably have to look pretty deep into your soul at work, and you may already have a problem you're not dealing with if you are worried that your people would actually go home and not work. I have zero of that fear, right? And I don't see any of my people. I see them all once a year when we come in for the holiday party.
Right.
But we also change the way we work, and the way we work is very team-based. So we have a research team and a customer service team, and we have a lot of crossover to that. And so we are always in these team settings, and often the team leaders are the person who has the most passion about that thing. It is not the hierarchical person. It's not like, well, the director of operations must be the leader of the research team. No, it's the main research person who does report to him, but she's the one that has the most control and the most day-to-day action on that team. She runs the team, right? So we set this up in a very intentional way so that we are making sure that those people who are running the job are also controlling the team. And what they say goes. And so us as the leaders, when we show up on teams, we're there to be an equal member of the team. And so we try to show our, ability that anyone can be a leader, anyone can come in. So one of the other things that we learn, I think, might be really important for people to understand, and this doesn't matter what kind of organization you're in, but we often want people to become leaders. I think the mistake that we make is we want people to be full-time leaders. And not everybody wants to be a leader all the time.
So tell us about that. That's interesting. That's an interesting distinction.
Yeah. So we have those people, I would say, like me, card-carrying extrovert. I love to be in charge of everything. I came out of the womb, and literally
Telling your mom what to do.
Telling my mom what to do, and I had a lemonade stand, right? I mean, so that's my personality, and that's why I'm a CEO. But if you're not that person, that's okay. And I noticed that there are people who want to be leaders at a mid-manager level, right? Executive team level, that's great. But I have all of these other people at the other level that don't want that job. They don't want the constant responsibility. However, you stick them on a team and you ask them to be the leader 4 hours out of the week, they'll kill it. They'll be fantastic, right? And you're not telling them, hey, if you do this, then I'm going to promote you and you're going to do all these other things. There's a whole group of people that just want to do their job really, really well. They want to be a part of a great organization, and they don't aspire to be the CEO one day. I think we have this false sense that everyone wants to be the CEO one day, and that's not true. Not everyone has that aspiration, and not everybody can be the CEO one day, or we wouldn't have anybody do all the rest of the work. Right? So,
but the other advantage of that is that those people also discover things about themselves. So they may be the person who says, I don't want to be a CEO, and then find like, oh my God, I really enjoy this. This is great. I'd actually like to do more.
Right. I have had that. I have had the people that thought they would never go that direction, and they were given the opportunity to lead in a small way, and they took it from there, right? But I will tell you, the norm is 99 times out of 100, they're willing to step out of their comfort zone and be a leader for a few hours a week.
Sure.
But then go back to where they're happy.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
And they shine and they excel and they do a great job, because we don't realize it's a lot. Not everyone wants the emotional burden and the responsibility of being in charge of a whole group of people all the time.
No.
Right? They're just not wired the same way as maybe you or I are. And that there's nothing wrong with that, but we picked up on it was a fantastic way for us to get more leadership in the organization by asking them to do something small and promising them we weren't going to come back and then ask them for another one and another one and another one. And they're just really happy with that.
That's a very cool insight around culture, because I think in the hierarchical nature of what we've all been part of is you go from here to being a manager, and you go from being a manager to being a manager of a larger group, and we are assuming that people want to climb that corporate ladder, and as you said, they may want to, they may not want to, and they may want to occasionally, and I love that you've created an environment or a culture that gives permission to say, yeah, I'm ready to jump into this, but not for more than a month, or not for more than a few hours a week, or a small team. And that's a very interesting and rather refreshing way of looking at leadership than we traditionally think of it. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's really about understanding who your people are, right? If you are being intuitive to who they are and their person, if you actually really read their personality test, if you do one when they come in the door, it's pretty clear. You can see a lot of this stuff, and I think we make the mistake of saying, "But I can get more out of them. I can teach them. I can mold them. But
oftentimes, don't you find, Chris, that oftentimes that's egoic? That's more to do with me, the leader, because I'm going to mentor you and I'm going to turn you into a great leader. Well, that's nice, but I don't want to be one.
Right. I just want to.
I'll look great when I've changed you.
Exactly, and it's all ego-driven. You're absolutely right. And
it's fascinating.
If we can help people be the best they want to be, that's all we can do. And for the next 3 years, that person may be really happy doing what they're doing. And maybe at 3 years and a day, they suddenly come to you and say, I've decided I want to be the CEO one day. Cool. Right?
Absolutely.
But as long as they want to do whatever it is they want to do, how do you get the most out of them in a way that keeps that going and keeps them happy and engaged? And so we had someone come in and measure our engagement levels. They looked, because of our remote organization. Our active engagement is 98%.
Wow.
Okay? If you take that and you minus any active, there are times when people are actively disengaged. So our overall score is like 64%.
That's
Now,
insanely high.
Gallup is 33, says 33. If you remove sales and upper management, it's actually 20%, they say, right?
If you remove sales and upper management, it's down to 20? I did not know that. Wow.
Average employee is 20. That's a little like side thing if you look, because the most engaged department is sales, and the most engaged group is management. The most engaged generational group are baby boomers, right? So if you look at who your average employee is, they're not in sales, they're not management, they're not a baby boomer. Most of them then are disengaged, right? They have pretty low engagement scores. And so ours are up in the 60 percentile. And we think it's because we set in some very specific things for our organization. Work-life balance, right? We don't think about work. I didn't think, when I woke up today, I didn't say, oh, it's Monday, I have to go to work today.
No.
That's not how we think. And we don't think TGIF, it's the Friday's finally here, we're going to be done. That's not how we think about work. I'm sure there's some people in our organization that do, but most of us think about it in a more fluid way. We may take off 3 hours in the middle of a Tuesday to go read a book or deal with something with our kids, and then go do 3 hours on Saturday because that's when it's good for us to do it. And it's more pliable, and I think that's a great part about remote work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, one of the things I want to go into is something that I truly believe far too few companies are paying attention to, and I know it's something you're committed to. It's something I actually wrote about extensively in this book, Fiercely Loyal, which is the importance of community involvement. And I know that you are very involved in community, committed to community involvement. Talk to us a bit about that and why you think that's an important part of understanding corporate culture.
Yeah, so we've actually struggled a little bit on how to, like, as a company, push people to what are they supposed to do, because we want them to focus on what they're passionate about. And so as an organization, we don't like pick one charity and say, this is the charity we support, because we want the energy, we want people, but we do push people to think about where they can make a difference in their communities. And so we like to talk about and celebrate, are they a baseball coach? Are they an umpire on the weekends? Are they, volunteering to a charitable organization? Are they, going and building for Habitat to Humanity? So our answer internally is to just celebrate and to talk about it, and share the things that we did to help our community. We do that inside of our little water cooler inside Slack. We have a water cooler room where we talk about anything goes as long as it's work appropriate. And that's also where we thank people. So it's the room that gets the most activity. But we talk about those things when we can. And leaders have to be the ones. So there's a few areas that I think have to be top down, where the leaders have to be doing the most amount of work to set the tone. The first one is on mistakes. If you're not admitting your mistakes and talking about mistakes as a leader, then no one else will feel safe to do so. And if you're not setting the tone as a leader on how we're going to impact our communities, right? How we're going to give back, then other people don't necessarily, they don't think about it. They're not sharing it, and so when leaders are doing that, other people feel comfortable to come back and say, this is what I'm doing.
But, again, I think that very often companies, CEOs are ignoring that part of being part of the community and participating and being part of it, or they are doing it quietly off on the side and nobody knows, and it's a bit sort of secretive. Or they do it, but it's actually not out of any sense of genuine caring, but it's much more out of it's a good PR stunt. Now, the interesting thing about that, and if you don't mind, I'm going to bring something up that's a bit more personal here around you, is that you serve on the board of Working Wardrobes, which is a nonprofit organization that empowers people who are overcoming very challenging situations such as abuse or homelessness, so that you can assist them re-entering into the workforce and achieve levels of self-sufficiency. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I have served on the board in the past. I've done through my cycle now. I'm not on the board as of this active moment. Want to just make
Right.
sure not misleading anybody. And I do very much support that organization and
Absolutely.
everything from donating my time to donating my clothes to whatever. So, for us, it was, so my core business is, we're doing background checks. And at some level, there are some people we keep from getting a job, right? Because they shouldn't get that job because they,
Right.
molested a child or stole money or did something terrible, then they shouldn't be in that job. But sort of a yin and a yang for me was, can I go back, can I give back and help people who've had problems find jobs? Can I do the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
And so that organization focuses in on helping people find a job. And I don't think most people realize this, but most people who are in a spot in their life where they're struggling, they don't have the clothes they need to actually go and apply for a job. So we say, "Dude, why don't you help yourself? You poor person, why don't you go and get a job? Why don't you?" Well, they show up to the job and the rags they're wearing, they ain't going to get the job, right?
No.
And so whether that's their fault or not that they're at that point in their life, to me and to the organization, that's irrelevant. It's are they at the point where they want to be helped, they want to improve their life? Then the organization itself steps in and says, let's get you a suit. Let's get you the clothes that you need, right, to go to that job and look the part. And in most cases, they because they have the resume, they have the experience, they just don't have the exterior thing that people need to see in order to hire them. And they have so many successes. And then they have recently moved into, they call it their VetNet program, where they're actually helping veterans. Most people don't realize that almost every veteran coming out of the military, they only have their dress military. They don't own a suit.
No.
A lot of them went in as kids, right, as young adults.
Sure.
And they went and did a career in the military, and they come out and they don't have enough money, and they certainly don't have the ability to go and buy a suit. And to then go show up and be able to transfer from military world to the private sector. And so that organization really helps in a very profound way, whether it's someone who's on the streets, who has made mistakes in their life, has had a hard time, or if they're someone coming out of the military, right? They've served our country, and now they just need that extra help in transitioning from one to the other. So it's a great organization, whether you want to encourage people to give their time, give their money. If they're local in Orange County, California, they can bring their old suits and shirts and dresses and things that maybe would look really good. Maybe you've lost some weight or gained some weight and you can't wear those clothes anymore. Donate them to someone who actually can use them and take them to an interview. It's really important.
I just think it's so great, that you're involved. But I mean, so often we, as in the normal guy and gal, walk down the street, we see the homeless person and we jump to assumptions, and we don't make eye contact. And I've talked a lot about this on the show before in different contexts, but we just don't see human beings. We see a homeless, I better not look. We see a drug addict, I better not look. But you don't know what's the backstory, and you certainly don't, and you lazy bum, get a job. Well, how do you know that person hasn't gone and tried to get a job, but there's nowhere for them to shower? There's no decent shoes for them to put on. I see these wonderful things, little short videos I've seen on Facebook lately of hairdressers and barbers who have volunteered to go and shave people and cut their hair, and and so they feel clean and look, and so they can put on a suit from this group and go out and go, I worked as an executive for 15 years. And I ran into a horrible time at the recession, and my life's gone down the toilet since then. Yeah. And really, I need a shower, I need a shave, I need a haircut, and I need a decent outfit. And that can be enough of a jump in the self-worth of that individual to transform their freaking lives. We got to grasp that, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I really do. I think it's fabulous. Yeah.
And especially when someone shows up to a program and says they want help, that's the moment for me when I want to get them as much help as possible. Because
absolutely,
there are people who are on the streets and want to be there. There are people that don't want they're not in a place in their life that are on drugs and they are having problems. And so there are those people. And so it's okay not to want to help those people if they're just going to take your hand out and go buy, meth. Nobody wants that either. But there are people that do want help. And so when they show up, and Working Wardrobes is a great example, they make people go through a step classes and learn things, and they have to show up and do several things before they get to this event where they get groomed and they get coaching and they get a suit. It isn't just show up, here's a suit, bye, here you go, right?
No.
There's a whole validation process in there, and ongoing support. And so those people that want to get better and want their lives to be better, they can.
That's fabulous.
Those that aren't serious, then they fall out, right? And hopefully they'll come back. But so there are good programs out there for people. It isn't just a handout. If you're worried about just essentially helping someone get high, there are other ways for you to help for those people who are ready to change their lives.
Now, we've spoken about your own company. It's being hit by a recession, you restructuring it. We've talked about your culture, working with remote teams, and we've talked about building cultures inside of other companies. We've touched in on the 7 pillars. We've gone through all those things. We've even talked about your community work and your involvement in building and being part of community and how important that is as a leader. But help us understand, what is it specifically that you do to help other CEOs? Because I know you're working with the cultures, but you actually work with the CEOs themselves. Tell us a little bit about what it is you do there.
Yeah, one of the things I love to do is go and do what I call a culture hackathon, which is we go in and try to hack what's happening right now and design or come up with what do they want. Again, it's sort of that appreciative inquiry idea. What do we want it to be in the future? Because if you're not designing your culture, if you're not actively thinking about how it's going to change and where you want it to go, then your culture is going to stay the same, or it's going to get worse. Or even if it stays the same, but the world around you changes and you haven't changed with it, then you can't really be prepared. I mean, we're almost to the point here where we're going to have 5 different generations inside of our organizations on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with that? We have ever-changing, our government is certainly one that could have an entire
there's a whole show right there.
I mean, there's so many things happening. How does your organization deal with that?
Yeah.
So I love to go in and say, especially for a growing company, if your company's growing or maybe your company's had a big change, let's go back and design that, because I had to go back and do that on my own. And it took me 2 years of having every mentor I could have, every book I could read, everything I could do. And I had to figure it out on my own. And every idea I had, it took me 6 months, right, to figure it out, to validate it, to run it through this test and to come up with all that. I like to go in and I can help someone in a day or 2 days, and we can hack through it and get through all that. I've already read all the books. I already know all the stuff. I can tell them whether or not those 5 things they just said, I can give them the 3 examples of where that failed or where that worked really, really well, and to help them in one day be able to validate and figure out what's the right thing to do and set in motion what their culture is going to be going forward. So that's really fun to do one-on-one. The other thing,
I'm sure,
go do facilitations with leadership teams, maybe help them as a group walk through that process,
right,
as an outside person, so that they feel safe to talk about. It's not just the CEO saying this is what we're going to do, right, guys? Yes. And as they nod their head, everyone else nods their head, right? And that's not what they're
sycophantically.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So as a leader, particularly as conscious leaders, we're all committed to our growth. As successful as you are, it's one of the questions I like to ask, because I think that it's very easy to pedestalize our guests or even myself. And so I like to ask this question. As a leader, what's one thing that you're still working on within yourself?
I got a long list.
Well, sure, but today.
Yeah, let me pick one. I still am pretty bad with my to-do list. I'm supposed to write out my list every day. I will tell you, writing a list gives me anxiety. And then when I finally get it written down, then I'm supposed to then put, ABC or rocks, pebbles, stones. I'm supposed to prioritize that. And on a good day, I focus on all my A tasks, my biggest things. Right. I should focus on all those, right? On a bad day, I've just filled my day up with C tasks, and at the end of the day, I feel like crap because I didn't get anything done. But I will tell you what I'm working on is to not get stuck in B's, because it's really easy to do a lot of B tasks and you feel like you got something done and you feel like you accomplished something, and it wasn't those dumb C tasks I should have given to someone else to do. So I always feel like that's something I'm working on
Fabulous.
To want to have the energy and the capacity and the drive to get the biggest, most impactful things done and done first, right?
Yeah.
And have the mental, discipline. And I've gotten a lot better, but discipline.
Sure, I understand.
To do it.
I can't relate at all personally.
Yeah.
Never happened to me. But it's true. I mean, it's true. I mean, there's a million things to be busy with.
Right.
And to actually say, okay, I got to move the big rocks first. Oh, well, let me move a few small rocks so I can
let me warm up with a few of these crappy ones.
Exactly.
It's 5 o'clock and you haven't.
Exactly. So in a world where we, you were talking about government and all the rest of it and the stuff that's going on around us right now, in a world where many people are afraid to voice their opinion without offending somebody, what's your bravest opinion? What's the bravest thing that you're holding as an opinion right now, Chris? That it could piss some people off, but it's like, this is something I really believe in, and it's something I think is really important.
Right. So I think it's really important for people to talk about the things and do the things that they're really good at. So talk about the things that you know about. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, speak your truth," and to say. I think it's really important for people to focus on what they actually are an expert in and something they are passionate about, that they have studied and talked about. You should be very vocal and very out there about the things that you know a lot about. But you should also shut your mouth and listen more if you don't know, right? I think we're society sort of we're trying to figure this out because we have these platforms where we can talk and there are people who might listen. But just because you can talk and someone might listen doesn't mean you should. So, I've been actively sort of promoting and asking people to talk more about what they know, right? What they can really bring to the table and contribute, because maybe they've studied, this type of guitar for 20 years, or maybe they know everything there is to know about flags, or I don't know, whatever their hobby, whatever the thing is, you should be talking about that all day long. You should be shouting out the rooftops and teaching us something, and the rest of us should shut up and listen.
I love that, actually. I actually love that brave opinion, because I think that's good, because you're right. There's all these platforms. We can all talk about all kinds of stuff, but to actually say, well, what do I really know about? But even in saying that, the caution is that you probably know about stuff that you take for granted. You think everybody knows that. But the truth is they don't. And instead of trying to always form opinions about stuff that you don't really care about and doesn't really matter in order to look like you're a smart guy, just actually ask you, one of the things you can do is ask other people who know you, like, what do you think I really know a lot about? And I guarantee you that everybody's like, damn, man, you know a lot about this. And you're like, really?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
There's a great story from one of my teachers, Stuart Wilde, from many, many years ago. And he talked about when he lived in the UK, and he said him and his mates would hang out and they would go to movies. And one of their friends, he said, drove him nuts. They all hated him going to the film. They didn't want to take him because he would watch a World War II movie, and during the movie he'd say, they got the hat on wrong. That's the wrong lapel. That's the wrong badge. That tank didn't exist until 3 years later. That's ridiculous. And he said, this guy was not smart. He goes, he was the dumbest among us, and we all used to give him shit for being dumb. But he knew the inside outs of the movies, but he would drive us mad with these movies. Yeah. So we all got so sick of it that one of us turned around to him one day in the movie and said, shut up, stop telling us, and tell them. So what did he do? In his dumb way, he wrote to MGM or one of the big studios and said he's got his hat on wrong, he's got the wrong lapel on, or whatever it was. They went, well, would you come to Hollywood and tell us? He did. He flew out there. He became a consultant on movies. And with the money he made, guess what he bought? Memorabilia that was Second World War memorabilia, and then rented it to the studios using the money that they paid him. Brilliant. That's a great example of Know
Right.
what you know. Get
Know what
good
you
at it.
know and go and talk about that. And I also, again, and then the other part is if you don't really know, no, shut up. Because, if I go watch a movie and it's just an average movie and I don't like it, do I need to go and write that on Facebook or Twitter? Do I need to go put in a comment? I thought this movie was okay. No one cares. I'm not a movie critic. But if I'm going to go and write a comment about a book that I've read about culture, because that is something I'm passionate about, then somebody might care what my opinion is because it's something
Exactly.
I'm talking about, right?
Exactly.
So talk more about what you know about and shut up and listen about the stuff you don't know about.
I love it. Tell us, Chris, as we come towards the end, what's a guilty pleasure for Chris Dyer?
Oh, guilty pleasure. Besides wine, probably buying guitars.
Really? Buying guitars.
Buying guitars. I have
After you
to.
drink a lot of wine?
No, but yeah.
Then it's like, okay, I'm going to buy some more.
No, yeah. So I play in a band, and we're getting ready to record here again, and so it's always the next guitar I have to have, right?
Right.
I'm good about selling the other ones once
Well, that's good.
I don't have a museum of guitars here or anything, but I do have that shiny new object syndrome where it's like, oh, this guitar is just a tiny bit different than this one. Honestly, and when I'm being real with myself, it's the player that makes the difference. It's how much you practice, and the guitar makes very little difference. It's some difference, but I love to just get a new one, and that's my guilty pleasure. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. So as we finish up, I always like to finish with the same question, which is, it's wonderful that people listen, but I want them to go away with something practical. And so what is a piece of practical guidance that you would offer our audience that they can go away and do, preferably in the next 24 hours, but certainly within the next few working days? What would you say to them as a piece of practical guidance?
I would challenge them, and this ties to the positivity thing, so slightly different, not to repeat anything we already said. I would challenge them for the next week to say yes to every question that is asked of them. Every yes or no question that's asked, say yes. And I will tell you that has drastically changed my life. I have ended up places I would have never expected, on top of Mount Fuji and in Guatemala doing a speaking thing. And I have been so many places and done so many things because I said yes. Yes, and yes, but you can have some qualifiers on there, and people might. What if my teenager says, "Can I go out on a date?" and they haven't done their homework? Well, you say yes, but you have to do your homework first, right? The whole switching of the conversation with everyone in your organization, every person you're around, if you say yes to whatever the question is, and then add in your qualifiers,
provisos, whatever they are, yeah.
It is shocking how things change around you and how you end up in situations that are so wonderful. I was on this great podcast. The guy asked me to do a podcast on Sunday. I said yes. I didn't really ask a lot of questions. I said sure. He said, come on down to this location. I show up, and there's an entire production studio there. They're doing a video podcast on the beach. I just said yes to come in. I thought I was putting a pair of headphones on and talking about culture. I said yes, right? It turned out to be a really cool thing. When I've said yes and gone places or taken calls with people even when I didn't have time, then they introduced me to other people. I mean, it's like this multiplying effect over and over and over again. And I find that the interactions with everyone in my life has really changed because they feel like they can come to me with ideas and with things. And I'm not going to say no. I'm not a no person. I'm not a negative person. Doesn't mean we always do it. Doesn't mean I'm,
no.
Doesn't mean
but yes, I'm open.
Yes, I'm open. Right. And it's really changed a lot. There's a lot of great books on this, this topic. You can go, but just try it, right? And you can use yes and yes but to protect yourself. But it really has fundamentally changed my life, and I think it's something so easy that you'll see immediate results with right away.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Listen, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out about you and all the wonderful resources that you and your company offers.
Yeah. So if you want background checks and drug testing, peopleg2.com. If you want consulting, speaking, and anything else I do on the side, Chris, and then the letter P, chrisdyer.com is where you can find me. You can find my book on Amazon. And of course, I do a podcast every week called Talent Talk that I'm sure where they found your podcast, they can find mine as well. So
fabulous. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been a joy, a pleasure. Thank you for all that you've offered today. It's been awesome. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, as always, remember the information's worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from the application of what it is you've learned. So go away, listen back, listen a couple of times, take some notes and think about how you can apply it. And maybe start with that first piece of practical advice, which is say yes. You can hang out with our other conscious leaders and chat about this show or any previous shows by going to our Facebook group. Again, just search out Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com. You can either /consulting or /speaking, fullmontyleadership.com. Be aware that the research consistently shows that the fastest growing companies face the same challenge that spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing top talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can outsource authenticity. Also remember to drop by the Matrix. This is your chance to really get a self-assessment tool and find out where your strengths are in the 5 categories of leadership. Have a look there. It's Matrix, like the movie, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix tool. It's valued at $197, absolutely free to you. I want to thank you for sharing this show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about what you're doing with your culture. Are you saying yes and building something magnificent? Or are you in your own way? Remember, you've got 2 cultures, the one you have and the one you think you have. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.